Okay, we are live. Infinite Plane Radio, 7/24/2023, X Day. Twitter has become X, and that's been the main topic of the day. And I wanna talk about that, Jamie Foxx, a very related psyop. Right now, we're also connecting on the audio stream, so if you're listening at the Radio King, TuneIn, Paranormal Radio, or radio.net, we are live, and you can join us in the chats now. And if you go to YouTube, you can get yourself a wrench. Joined already by Brogetta. Look, there's a lot of YouTube channels open. The official one is where you can get the wrench, and that would be at Infinite Plane Society, a strike-free channel. No small miracle. It's actually had 3 strikes, but I've managed to wait them out. Joined by 737 Lean Dion. And look, I did send out something earlier today. I did send out a 1-hour podcast about the things we're gonna talk about now. I really had to do a an info dump because there's just so much material. Brogetta says, "I just finished Silo season 1. Looks like Elon's ultimate prophecy." Oh, cool. Okay, a couple of things here about Musk. Okay, so for one thing, Musk is prophesied in von Braun's book, Mars: A Technical Tale. The first ruler of Mars, the first colonizer, would be called the Elon. Moreover, the governing structure of Mars would be that of Rome. So when I say that Musk is the Martian Pope, I say that advisedly. He is the Martian Pope. It's got the papal structure, and the symbols are all the same. They've just been updated. They made obelisk like the one at St. Peter's Square look like a rocket, and instead of taking you to heaven, it takes you to space, and that's really the thing that we're talking about today, the meaning of it all. Like, it's a fact to say this: the esoteric core of these religious and occult practices that revolve around the, worship of the sex act and that kinda stuff, especially within the Thelemic cult, it has a parallel, and as we'll talk about. We're talking about the origins of SpaceX, Thelema, Mars, Mars being the Roman name for the Egyptian god Horus, and that my contention here is that the Mars program itself is not about taking us to Mars. It's about making Earth Mars. It's about making Earth resemble this Mars idealized, what I'm calling space communism, but this totally perfect, sustainable life. But the thing is, when you first get to Mars, it's already known that you're going to have to be underground for the first few generations. You're going to be Morlocks. Now, the thing is, he turned it to X because, and this all ties into this bigger theme. So the Pope of Mars, or this emperor figure, is actually just part of his overall character. He's also a reboot of Constantine, and the historic role is having to do with converting people into serfdom, which is, I'm equating the space program with a neo serfdom, lockdown, enclosed system, and everything else, a new dark age. But what's more, Constantine had a role in the consolidation of the worldview. And that's what they're doing right now with X. It's a consolidation of everything. Everybody's going to have to take the mark or the X. They're not going to have to, but the idea here is putting everything into it is a big key, because the concept of that I'm referring to here, this reprising a role of this historic character, is Constantine is correlated with this idea of consolidation. Consolidate an empire under a sign of the cross. Well, Musk is doing it under the sign of the X, and the X and the cross are the same thing. And when you get into the esoteric aspect of it, you do find that the X and the cross and the cube are all intimately connected with this astrotheological cult that runs the world. So when I say Pope Elon, you know, I I don't mean it as, merely a form of mockery. It's quite literal. And what we're seeing right now is just the next phase of this thing. And also remember the costume that he's wearing. The Halloween costume that Musk has been wearing, the Devil's Avenger, that's the red armor of the Emperor. Card number 4, and look at all the associations built into it. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. Mars associated with the ram, the red metal iron. And then you have Musk, Iron Man, Tony Stark. Then you have again, these are media tie-ins. The House of Stark on Game of Thrones and the Iron Throne, this is all referencing this age of Mars we're moving into. Musk wearing the red suit of armor with the ram's head, well, Mars is Aries, the ram. It's all very much connected to this archetype casting. Again, Mars, the new age that we're moving into. Now, Brogetta is talking about the movie Silo, an underground obelisk. I'll have to look at it. I haven't seen it. The next thing I'm checking out is this one about they cloned Tyrone, which is our next topic. But anyway, I wanna kind of go through a couple of things with this Elon Musk, this Martian Pope thing. I'm suggesting, and I said this when I published this in 2017, that Musk's role is space communism, a utopian scheme, a pie in the sky paradise, a bait and switch used by the oligarchs and the technocrats to keep the poor poor and to keep the upwardly mobile from climbing. They've equated outer space with this, trip to heaven. And I'm suggesting that Musk is selling us a bill of goods, more or less, but that this whole thing of consolidating everything under the sign of the X is again just building onto his existing character. Pope Elon is just one. We talk about Jeff Bezos and his correlation with Nimrod, and this is a very typical thing. And with a lot of these characters, they're embodying roles to convey messages as they alchemically process the mass mind. The number 24, the X, these things connect. The X folded up makes a cube. The 2 and the 4, when combined, form the sigil of Saturn, the astrological symbol of Saturn. 4 is the cross, 2 is the scythe. Saturn's the god of death in the sense of the harvest, the annual harvest, and the cycle. The symbol of Saturn is the astrological symbol is a cross combined with the scythe, which looks like a 42. You just have to recognize that they are putting symbols in plain sight by encoding things. It's just one layer you have to scratch. Yes, the rocket is just an obelisk. Yes, the number 42 is how they represent this Saturn thing. And you look at Musk putting 42,000 CubeSats into space. You look at Bezos putting $42 million into a clock. What is going on with this? What does this all mean? Well, 42 against Saturn. Cube is a symbol of Saturn. Satellites. Well, L is another name of Saturn. And the lights in the sky, I think you can correlate with the Elohim. But we're talking about the 42,000 CubeSats is all just more or less a way of representing their mystery Babylon paradigm under a scientific context. And we talked about this stuff at length, but we're just seeing it build up to something of a crescendo here. So I'm going to want to watch Silo. Demetria 101 says we can go to the moon. Oh, we can't. Oh, I see. But it's too hard to go to the moon, but we can go to Mars, no problem. Yeah, we're planning for Mars when the moon's been like just staring us in the face. I think it's a graphics thing, to be quite honest. I think they have to delay our transition into a multi-planetary species until the graphics are all updated. But they're conditioning the public to the point where they're not going to be able to tell simulation from real if it's on a screen. They can simulate space travel. There are a number of movies that demonstrate this aptly, but Musk's role in all of this is facilitating this transition of man into a multi-planetary species. That's his bigger picture, but they're equating space travel with progress. And my main point that I wrote in the Martian Pope article is that Musk is selling us on not indentured servitude, even worse, just pure serfdom. It's a one-way trip, this idea of going to Mars and living within an enclosed system. What, farming potatoes, working remotely, not taking anything with you, no property, no guns, no MAGA hats, no Republicans. It's gonna be a commune, and it's gonna be built around the idea of sustainability. I mean, that's pretty much it. But the thing with this Twitter becoming X is just more along the lines of his initial role being confirmed. I mean, X.com is not new. None of it's really new. Wayne Dion says, "If given the chance, why not die on Mars?" Yeah, exactly, that is what he said. Why not die on Mars? So the next topic, and this is all we're gonna get into all this too. Let me go ahead and move into this one because this is crazy. So there's a show on Netflix now called They Cloned Tyrone. They cloned Tyrone, and it says here, "A series of eerie events thrusts an unlikely trio onto the trail of a nefarious government conspiracy." So Jamie Foxx is in it. You have this background of Jamie Foxx's supposed illness, passing out on stage, dying, and having to be, resurrected, brought back. And when I saw that story, I saw it when it happened. I just took note of a few things that were really standing out at the time. They were focusing on his age being 55. And I was noting that this was right before the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. This was also right before, on that day, 4/4, April 4th, that Donald Trump was gonna be arraigned because of the Stormy Daniels thing, which happened to be referenced in the 55th Q drop about the gathering storm or the storm is coming. So we've been looking at this. The number 55 was also attached to Tyree Nichols, who was killed after a Rodney King-style beatdown. Now think about the name, Tyree Nichols. Tyree Nichols is a tie-in to, I believe, Hiram Abiff. There's a number of connections to this Masonic allegory, but the thing is, the name Tyrone is very close, and ultimately what we're talking about is this reoccurring character who is ritually killed and resurrected in the Masonic myth. So and you'll see the numbers and everything is consistent. It's consistently reiterated again and again, and that's why I'm saying here that when Jamie Foxx is being described as having been, I guess, unresponsive and then resurrected. Yeah, that's all scripting. But he stood out to me for a few reasons, namely his background roles. We're talking about specifically Django Unchained, but his role with BLM. And here's the bigger picture, because clone, like saying somebody's cloned, is another way of saying resurrected. If you like, the idea is like they're dead and they come back. So Tyrone was cloned, has an occult meaning. It ties in Tyree Nichols, King of Tyre, ties into Hiram Abiff and the Black Lives Matter martyrs. They cloned Hiram in that sense. In that sense, every Masonic initiate is a cloned Hiram. So I previously remarked on Jamie Foxx's medical issues because they highlighted it on CNN, and again, his age was the clue. He played Django Unchained, which connects a number of stories here. If you remember the movie Django Unchained, it's about an enslaved African American preacher who organized and led a rebellion of enslaved and free Black people in Southampton. So that's the story. We're talking about the Nat Turner. Django Unchained is somewhat inspired by that. While Django Unchained is in the theaters, you have this mass shooting by an LA cop named Christopher Dorner. Anyone care to guess how old Christopher Dorner was? He was the one who was reacting to systemic racism that prevented him from being promoted within the LAPD. He goes on a killing spree. But look at the name, specifically Christ in Christopher Dorner. He's 33, as Roxy W says. Lickety split, 33, right? So this 33-year-old Christopher is living the role of Django Unchained. He's fighting against the oppressors, and Professor Mark Lamont Hill is live on TV, super ecstatic, saying, "This is just like Django Unchained." He was cheering on a mass shooting. I mean, that was back when I thought this stuff was real, and I was like, "Man, that's unconscionable." Well, Dorner gets cornered in a cabin. So the cabin's like a burnt it's just like a house, single house, like a cube, and he is incinerated. Nothing's left but his passport. So what do you have here? The name Christ, Christopher Dorner, 33, burning man. This all ties into something here because Ye claims that he wrote Django Unchained. It was stolen by Fox, and it was stolen by Tarantino. Well, Ye even said he felt like Emmett Till. Emmett Till is the one who was lynched in the '50s that kicked off the civil rights. So Ye's kinda connected to it in that sense. But if you remember during the Dawn Day event, and this was in August of 2020 when they usually would have had a Burning Man, but it was canceled because COVID. Ye did this event where he set himself on fire walking out of a burning house, like Christopher Dorner. Significance there? There's quite a lot, as we'll get into. But a few things I just wanna reiterate here. So 55 years ago, MLK Jr. was killed. 55 seems to be a code for some kind of oncoming martyr ritual, and I wrote this months ago because I was noticing things. All the 55 synchronicities, like when Tyree Nichols was killed in the Rodney King style, and how many times was Rodney King hit with a baton? Another pop quiz. If you guessed 33, that's correct. So Rodney King baton 33 times. People compared or his death was staged to his Rodney King's beating rather, was used as a template for Tyree Nichols's. It was obviously templated, the way they shot it and everything. Now, when Tyree Nichols was in the hospital, there was a protest, and the protesters shut down I-55. He dies in custody. So they shut down I-55. Then the daughter of MLK Jr., whose father died 55 years before, joins at the memorial service. They actually have a eulogy at the Mason Temple where MLK Jr. gave his at the mountaintop speech about the promised land and all this. And this is all interesting because Trump goes in to be arraigned on 4/4, the anniversary of MLK's death. And as of now, Trump's being compared to Moses by none other than Jim Caviezel, spelled with a Q, calls himself Jesus Christ. Continuing, these are all important details. The name Fox has 2 crosses in it because the X is a cross. And 2 crosses, as I've discussed before, like with the number 4/4, which was the date that he was arraigned, 4/4, it represents a second coming. 2 crosses, the first rung is the death, the second is the resurrection. And by the way, on 4/4, Heath Ledger, the Joker, had his 44th birthday. Meanwhile, Joker 2, there's a second coming reference, J2, Joker 2 was being filmed in front of the courthouse where Trump was arraigned. No coincidences here. And the last Joker is Joaquin Phoenix. And think about this, Burning Man, and you'll see lots of Joaquin Phoenix imagery in that movie where his arms are out, there's a fire behind him. The name Phoenix was chosen for a reason with this Joker. Okay, continuing here. We are talking about the symbolism. Now, while Fox was in the hospital the first time, Emmett Till's accuser died. And this was one of the proto Karens, Carolyn Dunham. She accuses the 14-year-old of harassment and gets him lynched. Well, she just died at the age of 88. I saw that in the news at the same time that Jamie Foxx was in the news. 55, 88, 33 years apart. I don't know if there's anything meaningful there other than this. Emmett Till kicks off civil rights. Trayvon Martin kicks off BLM. Jamie Foxx is very much associated with Trayvon Martin. So what I'm suggesting is he's been brought out, Jamie Foxx that is. He has been rolled out for this psyop that we're seeing right now. And it all ties in to this Black Christ archetype that they have been conveying over a multitude of characters. I mean, if you look back, just the last couple of years, you've got stuff like Amir Locke on 2/2/2022, 22-year-old, the police kicked down his door. No, they don't kick down his door. They had a no-knock warrant. They unlock it. So Amir Locke gets shot on 2/2/2022, a palindrome, a mirror. His name is Amir, A-M-I-R, and he gets shot at 6:48 AM, which is a mirror of 846, the George Floyd number, 846. This is also in the Twin Cities. Again, George Floyd kneeled on 846, Twin Cities, 9/11 starts at 846. But then there was another shooting of Jayland Walker. This time, they pulled off the same numbers by using 8 cops, and they shot a total of like 100 rounds, but they hit him 46 times. 8, 4, 6. And during the protests over the death of Jayland Walker, there was the Patriot Front with their shields and their masks, and they accosted a black protester, and the photo op, the image that came out of it was this black protester arms out looking like he's being crucified with his head back, and it looks like he's surrounded by Roman soldiers, but it's the Patriot Front. Totally orchestrated. And they're putting these messages, they convey these messages out there, to the point where it just saturates everything is one of my points. And what I'm suggesting here is that Jamie Foxx is definitely connected with some incoming or this ongoing black versus white dialectic, but they're bringing something back here, and it can't be separated from Jason Aldean and the outrage about the Jason Aldean song "Try That in a Small Town." If you're not familiar with that whole drama, he releases a song and a video that goes number 1 on iTunes, and it references a certain courthouse where a very infamous lynching occurred. And this is either just an egregious oversight or an intentional provocation. Now, everyone's playing dumb, but knowing what we know about Jason Aldean and his role in the Vegas psyop, I think it's safe to say that this was an intentional provocation because nobody would have noticed if if it wasn't the case, if you ask me. No one would have noticed. They're referencing something that was before Emmett Till, like 1927 was this other lynching. And by the way, Emmett Till is gonna have a national monument soon. So they're bringing this stuff all back. Emmett Till, Jamie Foxx. You see there's a vibe they're creating here by putting all these archetypes out there, reiterating things. Now I'm going through your comments. Cody says, "What do you mean when you talk about space being pixelated like Minecraft? I've been gone for like a year, and this is the first time I've heard about this." Have you watched any International Space Station footage? I could point you to specifically the ESA, but if you look at some of their footage, there are many instances of green screen glitching, of pixelization. The pixelating, they say it's because of video compression artifacts because they're in space. No, as a video editor, I can tell that it's just they're using, like, Final Cut Pro. They're not up to speed. They're really not. They actually include a shadow beneath the ISS from the ESA footage, which is total garbage. My point is, either they're faking the ISS badly, or space is pixels and it's all simulation, and once you cross that Kármán line 62 miles up, it's all pixelated. So, I mean, what's more likely? You know, Occam's razor, what's more likely? Space is that we live in a Minecraft universe, and space is where you can actually see it's a sim, looks like pixelization, or they just can't get it right when it comes to video editing, which is what I think. Yeah, Lean Dion, exactly. Emmett Till back in the news, some new monument. Exactly, and it's been 88 years. No, no, his accuser just died at the age of 88, this proto Karen. I will be taking calls soon. I'm s I mean, in fact, I'm willing to take no, actually, I should not. I don't wanna take the risk. It tends to overload this particular tower, but I'm in the process of getting a new computer and selling this giant shark painting I did. It's shark I'm gonna sell it locally, and that should make it possible, so we'll have our phones open here in just a few days, and then they'll be open permanently. Okay, continuing. So I'm talking about Jamie Foxx and why he's in the news, and now this is where you know you're being gaslit. Do you remember what they said when people noticed the coincidence between white noise and the Palestine derailment? Do you remember what the media at large said? They said it was an eerie coincidence. Well, listen to this. This is from the Daily Beast. It is merely a coincidence that Jamie Foxx stars in They Cloned Tyrone, a new film that challenges our beliefs in outlandish machinations about the rich and powerful, while being the subject of absurd conspiracy theories regarding his hospitalization. But after watching the film, which streams on Netflix starting July 21st, it seems like a premeditated middle finger to the skeptics. It's merely a coincidence, in other words, that They Cloned Tyrone starring Jamie Foxx coincides with these rumors that he's been cloned. And the whole thing is about wild conspiracy theories, the likes of which he's been subject to. Now, the conspiracy theories around Jamie Foxx are likely planted to lead you to this. There's a lot of this type of manipulation of the truthers, but what they don't mention is the deeper meaning. Jamie Foxx in his world stage role in conjunction with the bigger BLM, martyr cult PSYOP and the introduction of this Black Christ archetype. So it's not merely just about the cloning thing, but that's not a coincidence. It's not merely a coincidence. It's not an eerie coincidence. This is standard operating procedure, but most people don't notice all the time because 'cause they're not paying attention like we do. But if you do pay attention, you'll know that, yeah, they are constantly running psyops, constantly running perception management and PR stunts. But once in a while, the public notices, you have to say, "Nothing to see here, just a coincidence." Like, what gives them the power to say that? What gives them the authority? It is merely a coincidence. How do you know? How do you know? What information do you have? It just seems like their job is to throw water on any kind of fire. They gotta put it out. Any speculation that the media is coordinated at the level that it is coordinated, look, the media is coordinated at the level that they can 9/11 us, and nobody knows it was all just a movie. I mean, that's how good it was back then. As bad as their space special effects are, you have to hand it to them in terms of the success of their wider psychological war that they've been waging. Now, most of you listening here have already been inoculated against the mind war, and none of this stuff sticks. Lean Dion says, in his new PSA video, Fox mocks pulling a face mask off as well as mentioning clones. Interesting. Again, the name Fox is premeditated. This stuff is all premeditated. These are world stage characters. And the roles that he played correspond to the incidents that happened in their quote real life. Pete Shea's here. Hey, Tim and everyone. 9/11 was the greatest blockbuster of our era. Yeah, look, let me bring this up. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick has predictive programming for 9/11 in The Shining. But the guardrail, the gatekeepers, they say, "Oh, yeah, there's evidence in there that he hinted that he did Apollo 11. Did Kubrick fake the moon landing?" And that question, "Did Kubrick fake the moon landing?" is the wrong question. The real question is, what is his role in this psychological war? Because he is involved in many psyops, not just Apollo 11. And if you just put it in that context, it's just Apollo 11, yes or no, you miss the big picture because his daughter has been going around for years. Vivian Kubrick has been trying to dispel the notion that he did Apollo 11. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. The fact of it is, he has his fingerprints. This Kubrick is part of the department that faked and hoaxed the world in a number of ways. So I'm just saying that just because Kubrick's daughter says that he didn't do Apollo 11 is actually not really not a good take. It's very uninformed, and it presumes that we're merely asserting that because he's so good at movies, he was recruited for this, and that's kind of the angle she uses. Like, "Oh, if he did it, it would have been way more real." So she's maintaining it was fake, it just wasn't him, and that's not really deep enough for me. That's like people say that the moon landing was fake to trick the Russians, but they still believe moon landings are even possible or that the space station's real. Like, no, it's a house of cards. If the moon landing's not real, nothing they've built since is real. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, when can we expect our next blockbuster? Look, I'm looking at 8 for a lot of reasons. Jurassic Liars 26, and a number of pretty good researchers on Twitter have pointed at that date for a lot of reasons. I'm looking at it. And Obama's birthday, that's his birthday, is part of it. He's a character that's involved in this psyop. So it's kind of notable that his chef just died. Not quite sure what to make of it yet. Again, I think he probably burned the hot dogs. Pete Shea says Kubrick's last movie was AI. Maybe he passed the baton to Steven Speckberger. True, true. And AI is everything. It's a big key to this whole thing. Even the letters AI, the 1919. It's key in all this stuff. But let me get back. So I'm talking about Jamie Foxx. I'm talking about Jamie Foxx and how his cloning, his death resurrection, Tyrone was cloned. It's all about this Tyree Nichols, Hiram Abiff thing. It's all about this death resurrection, the Masonic Christ. But specifically, this is about introducing this black martyr as the person. It's like they can't just bring back a Jesus and kill him. One person won't do it. They've had to create a number of outrages that all fit the same pattern. This is why I think Jason Aldean's trending. with his BLM call out. Try that in a small town. I think that's why Steven Jackson, who's been out of the public limelight for years, Steven Jackson, the twin of George Floyd, the 42-year-old twin of the 46-year-old George Floyd. Yeah, Steven Jackson's in the news right now because he threatened Alex Stein, who was mocking George Floyd in one of his comedic skits. Now, is Alex Stein a conspiracy theorist or a comedian? See, I think he's a conspiracy theorist, but a bad one. But I also think it's a conspiracy theory that he's a comedian. But whatever it is, he's in a position to somehow get the attention of someone like Steven Jackson. So Steven Jackson, George Floyd, Jason Aldean, all out there right now with this Jamie Foxx thing and the Emmett Till statue. No coincidences here. They're building up for something. PJ says every great movie has a soundtrack. Kid A was the 9/11 soundtrack. Interesting. Post me a link because there were a lot of bands that had music that came out on that day that beyond coincidence, and I don't think these musicians know. Like, I don't think those rappers in the coup knew what was gonna happen on 9/11, even though their album cover had the Twin Towers getting bombed and they had remote controls. Now they have a really interesting video, this band, The Coup, or this group, that has this Black Christ character looking like the Scarecrow, and it's this Wizard of Oz in the ghetto thing, where they march up a yellow brick sidewalk to the Wizard of Oz and they decapitate him, and he's like this banker. Anyway, I may look back into some of their predictive programming. Okay, continuing. Elephant Tusk says Bill and Hillary's chef also died of drowning back in 2015 in Taos, New Mexico. Nice place. Nice place. Ski town. Pete Shea says, "Great to hear you live, Tim." Look, I would be live 4 hours a day. I will be. I'm just not now because 'cause we're in the process of doing things. I have to say thanks to everyone who's been helping out. I had someone send, send some shelving over here from Amazon, and I have the inventory building up. I'm organizing everything. We're gonna have a permanent IPS headquarters store. You can already see it at timosman.art, but I'm adding more. All of our publications, I'm gonna be ordering merchandise from our principal designer, who's also the author of the coloring book that I have listed, and I'll be listing these things routinely, so you'll see. And that's gonna really keep the office open. It's gonna keep everything running as the IPS store. And the art sales are doing well anyway. I've had more than 400 sales. I've just been super busy getting everything set up, but I built myself a one-minute city. I live across the street, grocery stores right there, library, gym, everything that I need is liter and the post office is within a half a mile. So I'm just, like, in a one-minute city here, a quarter of a mile even. Lean Dion says, "Jay-Z, The Blueprint came out on that day." Yep, exactly. Jay-Z, The Blueprint. Now, Slayer put out an album called God Hates Us All, and one of the first tracks said something about a man-made virus infecting the world. So, I saw a lot of COVID stuff in some of the 9/11 stuff. Like, I believe there's a 311 album called K that has Corona on it. Shay says, "You got it made, Tim." I've been streamlining things and building my life around this. I have an office space next to a conference room, and we are enacting all of the plans that we've been developing over the years, and our reporters are gonna be activated and assigned very soon. I'm actually working on a documentary video to introduce what we do to a wider audience. But anyway, as I was saying, our schedule is gonna be a early morning and a late night. Open phones at night, early morning info dump, the IPS morning deprogram, evenings, infinite plane radio, open phones. The only reason we don't have that now is I'm upgrading the hardware. We tried it, but one computer crashed, the other had bad audio. No big deal. Lickety Split says Nodin has a Cthulhu HP Lovecraft connection. The X is a symbol of Nodan, which could be synonymous with Mars, it turns out. Okay, I would like some information about that because Cthulhu, look, the call of Cthulhu, and the word call, I think it has an etymological connection to challenge, like a call out. The call of Cthulhu has something to do with, I believe, the challenger or the destroyer in the abyss. Like this recent thing with a submarine going down on the solstice, it was all a psyop connected to this same story. I think about Revelation 9/11 and some beast of the abyss, the Kraken, Cthulhu, Godzilla. By the way, Godzilla's birthday is coming up 11/3, and there's gonna be a new Godzilla movie. They usually store him at sublevel 33, by the way. I mean, there's a lot we can say, though, about the this Kraken archetype they've been hitting us with in the last few years, but Lovecraft is the one in the City of the Dead, which is actually the same place in the ocean where NASA drops their satellites. They call it the Spacecraft Cemetery. The same place where Jules Verne, who conceptualized the moon landing first, I think, placed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Point Nemo. So Point Nemo, Riley, City of the Dead, NASA's Spacecraft Cemetery, all are at the same place. They call it the Pole of Inaccessibility because they care about you. They don't want to drop stuff where you might see it. It could all just be hypothetical and fake. But the point of it is, it's not a coincidence because Lovecraft is telling an old story in a new sci-fi context, sci-fi horror. Lights from the sky, elder gods, El, landing in this spot, rising back to the surface and taking over when the time is right, which is like now. And one of the things about the Lovecraftian mythos is that these elder gods, or specifically Cthulhu, this Kraken, it telepathically through dreams connects to all of its minions, all of its people. So it has this vibe like the hive mind. Like, if you can imagine everybody taking the mark gets plugged into a hive mind. Everyone taking the mark of the beast or whatever. Well, it's kind of the same thing with this Cthulhu thing. And I've thought for some time that Cthulhu even correlates with the biblical Leviathan, and that's not a physical being, which I don't even think could exist in the way it's described at that size, but that it's really a reference to something else, like a collective awakening, maybe even a collective communist uprising, burning down the old order, something along those lines. Raise the Leviathan. And there's a strong correlation between this Leviathan, this Kraken, and the Kundalini, and this raising of consciousness. And the hijacking of consciousness, perhaps. I mean, if you look at Musk and Neuralink and everything else he's involved in, I mean, he's one of the primary space fakers. This is, and look, one more thing. The space program was never about taking us to Mars or the moon. It was always about controlling inner space, your mind. That's what I think Kubrick's real role was, controlling inner space. As we'll describe, I think I know how they do this. Pete Shea says, "1 Minute City Blues, possible song title." Ears Up says, "Received some art cards last week, thanks, Tim." Yeah, thanks for ordering. I've sold more than 13,000 baseball card-sized paintings since 2008 through eBay. I'd taken a break for a few years, but I'm back on eBay, and my business model has always been small paintings, so there's less of a cost to produce and ship, and then high volume. So I'm usually painting 10, 15, 20 at a time, and I don't have a lot listed now, but I'll have more listed, and I'm gonna start focusing more on meme art and stuff that's related to what we talk about, our favorite crisis actors, anomalies, single shoes, anything that connects these psyops. I wanna do a series of art on psyops. Duper's Delight. I would buy I mean, I'd paint portraits of people with their Duper's Delight. Just kind of a side note, timosmond.art is the store. Probably the best way to keep this thing going because 'cause we're never gonna have any monetization on these platforms. Twitter has actually blocked us from Spaces, and I think Musk is behind it. Now we're talking about the mind control, controlling inner space, and so if Elon Musk is involved with Neuralink, and then, of course, he said, "Describe Twitter in 1 word, or describe X in 1 word." He said, "Everything." I said, "Monolith, what's the difference?" And I posted a picture of the new Twitter X logo. Look at the Twitter X logo and tilt it 45 degrees and tell me you don't see a single monolith against the horizon. Clockwork 113 says, "Damn, I'm late." Look, I'm gonna be more consistent, and I will be sending out text alerts, so and you won't miss anything. I will send everything in the newsletter. We already had a podcast go out today where I kind of briefed everyone on what we were gonna talk about. I usually try to do that in the mornings, but again, we're new setting things up. And I'm gonna have to go about an hour earlier than I had originally planned because there are other people that show up at the office, and the chiropractor mentioned or she asked what I do. I'm like, "Oh, I'm, recording audiobooks," because apparently they heard me. And that's what I was saying before. I don't wanna inadvertently spread mind viruses because the people out there have mind aids. They've got no mental immune system, and they will catch things. Ollie Goering says, "I got a description for X. Grimy, musky, yucky." Oh, yeah, the family. Okay, continuing. Let's talk about we'll skip that for now. I don't wanna talk about any other, popes right now. I was gonna talk about the Pope Bezos, but we'll get to him later. Okay, here it is. There was a few links that I posted on my Twitter account, Real Tim Osmond, having to do with Kubrick. So I was talking about Stanley Kubrick because I don't believe that you can simply write off Kubrick as maybe he did the moon landing or maybe he didn't. But here's the thing. I just recently watched Asteroid City, which is a Wes Anderson film. And turns out that the main character in Asteroid City is based on Stanley Kubrick, who even wears a camera around his neck. So this is a connection that's worth exploring. Oppenheimer had just come out, and I'm at the theater watching this Asteroid City. Oppenheimer's, like, being advertised, and I noticed that there's a nuke blowing up in the background, some, like, mushroom cloud in this Wes Anderson film, and it's not a real one, it's some kind of movie set that he's looking at, so he's unalarmed, but it's kind of a hint, I think. Kubrick looking at a fake nuke, but take note of the code here. Our intro into the nuclear age, 5:29 AM, July 16th, 1946, Trinity Site, 33rd parallel. Now, the symbolism of the Trinity Site ties into the JFK assassination. 5:29 is JFK's birthday, and the date 7/16. Well, 7/16 is the date that Apollo launched from Kennedy Spaceport. JFK Jr.'s death date was 7/16. Crashing from the Sky, Falling Man, Eyes Wide Shut was released on 7/16, and JFK's assassination on 11/22/63 happened to be on the same day that they screened Doctor Strangelove, which is about the bomb. And Vivian Kubrick had said that the State Department had visited Kubrick because of his movie set looked like the war room, some kind of planning room at the pen some kind of it looked like he had some kind of inside information, and they had to look at his set, according to Vivian Kubrick. And I'm suggesting here, because she said he was psychic, that maybe he was just psychic and he was picking up on things with his movies. And I'm saying, no, there's too much of a coordination here between every Kubrick release and all of these major psyops, from the Kennedy assassination, Kennedy deaths to 9/11. It's pretty well rounded. So I've been thinking that maybe Kubrick, because look, he wasn't making movies in 1946, but the same bit of code is still prevalent there. So I'm thinking maybe there's something else going on with this name. And I thought this it could be this. When the camera first emerged, it was the camera obscura, which is a cube that you go into, a cube. Now, this is all esoteric, but I think it's very central to the big picture because the camera obscures reality by selectively omitting and replacing with a focused picture, just as our reality through the screen, our screened reality, is comprised of focused pictures with a great obscured reality. I would contend world model, the world stage, the worldview that the masses live through, this mainstream mediated worldview, my contention is that it's a product of lies by omission, of things left out more than by what they say, and that the central lens, like the central directors, could be represented by the all-seeing eye, that this monolithic cult that runs the place have total creative control, and that's why I think the camera is so significant in all of this. And so what I'm suggesting here is the name Kubrick may actually have some kind of meaning, tie into a perhaps a department, but more specifically, the symbol of the cube is what I'm pointing out here. And bricks, interestingly enough, are very significant if you look at the symbol of the pyramid itself. So I'm thinking, well, the Masons say in their lore, in their literature, that they are building King Solomon's temple allegorically, and that every Mason is a polished brick. They start off as a rough stone and they're polished into a brick to be put into this temple, this big edifice. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe Kubrick is some kind of code for this new temple being built out of the images created through this centralized media. In other words, the false witnessing of the camera lens, and each psyop is a brick. Every operation is another piece to this bigger construct, this edifice of lies that we all live within. Catching up on your comments, Demetria 101 says, "We sound nuts to the common folk." Oh, you mean those people that believe that we're on a 25,000-mile circumference spinning ball? Yeah, I care what they think. The ones who believe what they see on the screen, despite how it may contradict what they perceive. See, they're all believers, and you can't fault them for it. I mean, it's their responsibility to unmind F if they want to, but, they were born into it. Thinks as a penguin says, "Tim, you should annex the Penguinati domain." Oh, annex the building for the Penguinati? We could rent out all the offices here. In fact, if anyone was in town, we have a big conference room with a big whiteboard, and we could draw crazy mind maps all day. Nothing would stop us. Joined by Pippi Langstruff. Thank you for joining. Daniel Brown says, "How are you today?" from New Zealand. Elephant Tusk says, "I can imagine office personnel listening at the door with a cup." Well, I'm actually ordering some of those sound canceling panels that we use because I one of the plans that I have here, and I'm gonna source local talent for this, is I wanna have NPR style news briefs, but specifically written for IPR, specifically targeting those of you who are in the know, those of you who have already figured out how fake everything is. How nice would it be to have 2 or 3 news briefs a day, 5 to 10 minutes about the latest psyops, but delivered in the manner of NPR? And I'm gonna have the scripts written with the aid of ChatGPT, but the objective here is I'll have a cubicle, and I will somehow contract or work it out to where we have these recordings done on a near daily basis, along with press releases, which is a big part of what we're gonna be doing here in the near future. Exalt says, "Nukes equals Einstein the Jew." Yeah, remember Exalt. Exalt, is a frequent caller here. Says, "Oppenheimer, the Nazi versus Operation Paperclip, or Stanley Kubrick, the director." I'm not saying Kubrick directed the nukes. I'm just saying that the worldview fabricating department, which is NASA, which is well, now NASA, whatever it is, whatever forms it takes, I'm just saying that this is the department he worked in. Like, let me give you another clue here, another hint, I think. You had Lee Harvey Oswald shooting JFK from the grassy knoll, right? Well, there are correspondences between Lee Harvey Oswald and his girlfriend at the time where he said he was gonna go work at NASA because at the time he was working at Riley's Coffee. So, Lee Harvey Oswald at Riley's Coffee, all of his coworkers were sought after. They said, "Okay, let's talk to the people who worked with him, and did he give any clues that he was gonna go shoot the president?" Well, they weren't there because all the people who worked at Riley's Coffee went to go work at NASA. Lee Harvey Oswald told his girlfriend he thought he was gonna go work at NASA. And I'm saying maybe he did go to work at NASA, but they weren't assigning him to the moon. Like, "Hey, yeah, Lee, all your friends are gonna work in these departments, art departments, making the lander. You're gonna do something different, but we're all in the same department. You're gonna go shoot a president." So he probably thought he was gonna get a walk on the moon. Lean Dion says, "Just a brick in the wall." Pretty much. Yeah, just that's kinda what I'm suggesting here, is the name Kubrick may be some kind of code to the building of this monolithic structure, the MSM edifice of lies, and each brick is just another one of these, psyops of perspective of the world or story as told from the perspective of this camera. And in that movie I referenced, Asteroid City, Stanley Kubrick is a witness or the character who represents him, is a witness to the alien that descends. Now think about this, the alien has a six-pointed craft, like a hexagram, descending. Well, the six-pointed star, again, a symbol of Saturn, a light descending, everything we've already talked about. The alien coming down to meet the people who have boxes on their heads because they wanna observe some celestial phenomenon, they have to put the boxes over their heads, so they have cubes on their heads, a room full of people wearing cubes when the alien, the light from above, descends. I think the tie-in here has to do with Kubrick, and that perhaps his role in directing the coming alien invasion. I think that may be it. Scarlett Johansson's in the movie, and the name Scarlett is very significant, the actress's name, because we're talking about a movie that takes place in the desert, she's a movie star, aliens descend. I think she's supposed to represent Marjorie Cameron. Marjorie Cameron, the from the Hollywood rather, sorry, the Babylon working, and that she was the Hollywood movie star in Asteroid City, and Marjorie Cameron is the first one to have seen a UFO, and in this movie, it's about her being there, seeing the UFO. So I think there's a deeper level to that. I need to watch it again, though. Okay, going through your comments. Pete Shea says, "Is Lee Harvey Oswald Ron Paul?" Look, I can't debunk it. I cannot debunk it. And, I think wasn't it Ted Cruz's dad was hanging out with Lee Harvey Oswald, passing out flyers? There's this hilarious clip, if you can go back and find it, when Ted Cruz has to concede that he's not gonna be the nominee. He gets on stage with his dad and his wife, and he hugs his dad, and the wife tries to get in on the hug, and they don't see her, and Cruz elbows her in the face. And then his dad has his hand on Cruz's back, and he's making a Masonic hand sign. Very fascinating little clip there. I'll have to pull it up just to see Cruz elbow his wife in the face. But yeah, actually, I think even at the time, Donald Trump had said that Ted Cruz's dad had possibly killed Kennedy. I mean, hilarious stuff. Okay, I have to go now, unfortunately. I have to run a couple of errands, but we're gonna be back early in the morning. Yeah, audio's fixed. I'm not gonna go back to using that broken computer. We're gonna do it this way, no OBS, but I'm gonna replace the computer this week. It's Shark Week, and I did a big painting of a shark, which I'm gonna sell locally. I have a number of interested buyers, so it's gonna be very easy to flip it into some hardware, and we'll be able to start taking calls, possibly as early as tomorrow. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate everyone's support here as we have moved into our permanent headquarters, the IPS HQ here in Albuquerque. This is ground zero for the auto hoax insurrection. Because what we're doing is we are creating a split between the mass mediated worldview and all exiles, those who get thrown to the fringes and fed to various, I would say, false awakening scenarios. Like they're fed into wokeism or red pillism, which don't take you out of the world stage's media ecosystem. They don't go all the way. They don't go far enough, but we do. So what I'm saying is that we're going to get all those who are close enough to the fringe, which I call the cutting fringe, the edge of acceptable discourse, and we're going to onboard a huge chunk of that demographic into the off-world stage perspective. And once that happens, we will have a permanent fixture, what I'm calling the parallel media. And the parallel media will be able to continue, I think, to fine-tune what we do. And not only that, but it'll be a lot more fun as it was in the early days before we were targeted for censorship by White House connected goons. But the fact that we've continued despite all of that is a good indicator of where things are going to go into the future here. Anyway, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways now is to go to timosman.art. That's just a hot link that will take you to the eBay store. And we're selling publications. We have a couple copies of the coloring book by X-Pac. I'm going to be listing some more stuff, an additional copy of the World Stage Deprogramming Guide, among other things. And if you are awaiting anything that got held back when I moved and went into this limbo, just send me an email and I will fulfill those orders pronto. Just go to email me at osmond007@gmail.com. All right, I'll see you all in the morning. Thank you for joining. And again, ips.monster, get on the newsletter and expect the archives probably in about half an hour.